In the video today, I will share with you how you can innovate how you do product discovery. Particularly, I will share with you a method I wish I knew many years ago when I started designing products and solutions based on technologies for enterprise customers. I will share with you how you can decide if a solution is worth building using just 4 days and the design sprint methodology. So, if you are watching this video, it's likely that you are involved in designing and delivering or productizing, creating new products and solutions. And you are probably very familiar with this loop, this feedback loop that has become very popular, particularly since Agile methodologies came to be in the early 2000s. The idea of having a feedback loop where you start with some data that helps you identify ideas of which products and services are worth building. You start building a minimum viable product or minimum amount of value that is delivered cyclically, and you build that minimum amount of value, that minimum viable product, you launch it, you get feedback from the users. With that feedback, you have data for new ideas about new features or how to adjust existing features, you build them, you launch them, and this is the loop that is supposed to work. However, in many cases, that loop doesn't work as expected. In many cases, we find that our teams are very busy, but they are going nowhere. The real benefit of the loop is not translating into value that users are willing to use and pay for. You might end up having data and moving to the idea, and that gets stuck. You end up having endless meetings without decisions being made about how to proceed, how to move forward, what product is worth pursuing, and what is the best approach to make that product or solution for a problem a reality. Alternatively, what can happen is that you have decided, let's build it, and you start building, and that building phase takes very long. And by the time you launch it, the user doesn't like it. So ultimately, although this cycle is very helpful, we should target and aim to break it. And we should target to aim and validate those ideas that we have for products or services before we go into the building phase. And this idea of we have some data, I have an idea about a product, I have an idea about how to solve a problem for a user, a customer. Let's validate that idea, gather some data, and with that data make the decision if we move into building, is what we are here to discuss today. And you can do that using the design sprint methodology. A design sprint is a 4-day process where you have a small cross-functional team that will focus on solving a complex problem, defining a solution to solve that problem, prototyping it, and validating it with real users. Design sprint was developed by Google Ventures, actually by a person that after working in Microsoft and Google was fed up of the amount of time and waste that was happening when they were trying to innovate in new products and services. The outcome of the first design sprint he led was what became Google Meets or Google Hangouts. Since then, which was in 2010, it has been used by many organizations to innovate and make decisions and identify solutions that are worth pursuing. I will share some examples for you later in this video. Bottom line is that if you run a design sprint, this 4-day process, at the end of the process, you will validate ideas before you have invested a penny in building them. By doing so, you have reduced the risk of building the wrong thing and wasting resources, and you have accelerated innovation. Additionally, because this is done by a cross-functional team, you have gained momentum on how to solve the specific problem that you have identified that you want to solve and align those teams. And additionally, because you have validated the prototype of the solution with real users, you start having real customer insight and buy-in. Because when customers are involved in creating solutions, they become invested in them and want to see them succeed. So, what does a design sprint look like? Well, a design sprint is a 4-day process that should happen consecutively, ideally Monday to Thursday, that is run with a team that is a team of experts from 7 to 9 people from different areas of expertise, depending on the problem we are trying to solve, and a facilitator expert on facilitating the design sprint process. And that process will be run in a structured way by the facilitator, facilitating the team go through some activities that are based on design thinking. The team during those 4 days will understand the problem they are trying to solve, define what are the goals of that design sprint? What are the answers they need to get from real users at the end of the sprint to make the decision if a solution is worth building or not? Then they will ideate solutions for a specific problem that they are here to solve, decide which solution is worth prototyping, prototype the solution, and then validate and test that prototype with real users to be able to gather data to make decisions. So, in the 4-day sprint schedule, and by the way, when design sprint was developed in 2010, it was 5 days. Since then, there have been some improvements and iterations, and now you can run a design sprint in 4 days. But in general, in the 4-day schedule, you have Monday, where the team comes together and understands the challenge, reviews that what is the problem that they are trying to solve, the challenge that they are trying to find a solution for, define the success criteria for that design sprint, what do we need to know at the end of this design sprint to make a decision, and then they go into ideating and sketching possible solutions for that challenge. On Tuesday, they vote for the best ideas, and they decide what is the solution that is worth building. They define and prototype with a storyboard. What will the prototype look like? On Wednesday, they build the prototype. They do a dry run of that prototype, and then they refine the schedule for user testing. Because user testing happens on Tuesday, ideally there are 5 interviews with 5 users, and at the end of Tuesday, the team will have enough information and answers to those success criteria that they define on Monday to decide if it's worth iterating in that solution. It's good but not good enough yet. If the solution can be directly moved into, yes, let's build this, or if actually they have to pivot and find a different solution because that one is not going the right way. You can adapt the schedule for remote settings. You can also use AI tools for some of the different steps of the process. And additionally, the process per se can be adapted and has been adapted to be able to some of the activities to fine-tune them when the solution we are trying to build is an AI-based solution. So this is the theory. In practice, how have design sprints helped organizations to develop and validate ideas for new products and services? However, it's not only used for products. It has been used in these many years by many organizations to validate also processes, services, marketing strategies, business models, and many other use cases. I'm going to share with you some of the ones that are available online, and feel free to do your own research. But here are some of the ones that I find more meaningful to share to prove that actually design sprint can be used in any sector, in any company of any size. For example, the UK government, the UK Home Office, has used design sprint to answer the question, how might we help users that want to get a visa understand the option that applies to them? Uber has used design sprint to answer the question and solve the challenge of how might we help our Uber drivers so that they can complete the right request safely and in time. Netflix has used design sprint when they were having challenges in user engagement because it was declining. Design sprint helped Netflix identify what they have to change in their interface so that the user engagement will not decline but increase. 3M, one of the brands of 3M is Post-it. 3M wanted to solve the challenge they were having between the digital divide between the analog world of Post-it and the digital. And with design sprint, 3M was able to identify ways to bring the digital world into the Post-it experience. They developed 2 applications, and actually one of them won several awards. In the telco industry, Swisscom and Telstra have actually decided to use design sprint with their own enterprise customers, and they run design sprints with their customers to help their customers find solutions fast for the challenges they're having. Dutch Telecom had a challenge that they approached with design sprints. They wanted to answer the question of how might we co-create digital solutions that improve quality of life for citizens by addressing key challenges in cities and communities. And by doing quarterly design sprint with German associations in towns and municipalities, they were able to come up with these ideas of digital solutions. Also, Dutch Telecom decided to use this sprint for internal processes. They actually use design sprint to improve the employee experience when engaging with IT support, particularly for support with problems with their devices or when setting up as employees. Then, Companies like Nokia has used design sprint in different areas to improve digital experience and connectivity experiences. They have used design sprint to answer the question, how might we reduce congestion and improve crowd flow in the Nokia arena during peak times? Or also to come up with ideas about using 5G and immersive technologies to create engaging real-time experiences in the Nokia Stadium for both on-site and remote audiences. And finally, Nokia has also used design sprint to improve connectivity for remote workers. So the same company has used design sprint to solve many different challenges and come up with many different solutions to them. And they are not the only ones. Other use cases are the use cases for Slack and Headspace. Slack, for instance, both of them actually, have used them not to develop new products and services, but to identify product market fit and come up with strategies for their marketing. Slack at the time was in 2015 was having a challenge. It was mainly used by tech companies and tech users. So they used design sprint to come up with marketing communication ideas to be able to grow user taking of the service outside tech companies. And Headspace was willing to validate if it was worth pursuing Headspace services. Headspace is a mindfulness application for new audiences, in particular kids. Other companies have used design sprint to validate products and solutions in the hardware and physical space. Savio was releasing a robot that was going to be used in hotels, for instance, to deliver, I don't know, toothbrushes and other goods to the guest. And they were concerned about how should the robot behave in a way that humans will not be rejecting it and actually will love it. So they ran a design sprint to come up with what would be an appealing behavior for a robot. Thanks to the design sprint, they identified what should be that robot personality. And after releasing the robots in some hotels in the States, they got quite good coverage by media outlets because of how successful and loved they were by the guests of the hotels. And Lego wanted to really reinvent the way they were reaching their audiences. And in a year, they ran 150 design sprints. And there are many other use cases. Johnson & Johnson has used it in a highly regulated area like pharma research. And the outcomes that they described from running design sprints was that they were able to identify risk much earlier, and they were able to learn in an accelerated manner. Google has used design sprint for many things, and particularly, for instance, to improve recruitment. Other ways to use design sprint has been to create business models. For instance, a business model for platform services. And even in healthcare, design sprints have been used to help aftercare for patients, for instance, of dialysis, and helping them gain access to pain treatments because of some stigma. Patients were not getting the post-treatment that they needed to deal with pain. All the problems that I have described were worth running a design sprint. And what is the description of this problem? What is a problem worth running a design sprint for? When they are big enough to warrant the investment of that thing coming together for those 5 days. When it's not very specific, something like, oh, how do we change the color of a background? It has to be something meaningful that is not easy to solve. That there are high stakes. If you get this wrong, the cost is going to be very high. And we need quick decision making around this before we can allocate resources, budget, and set up a program to make it happen. And of course, a design sprint is worth running when you do the problem cannot be solved only by a couple of key people coming together, and you need a cross-functional team to make it happen. When a problem meets these characteristics, then is when you are really in a winner if you decide to invest 4 days and run a design sprint. All of this is about innovating how you innovate. How you find innovative solutions and validate that those solutions are of interest of your target users and customers for the specific problems that they need solving. And design sprint in the Gartner Hype Cycle for Innovation Practices is considered to be in the slope of alignment moving towards plateau of productivity. This is a method that enough companies have used to consider that is worth investing into to achieve the outcomes that it promises. And they are a strategic capability. When you and your company start using design sprint, you will have faster evidence-based decisions under uncertainty period, which I think is particularly important nowadays, where with all this AI hype, that many companies and leaders say, oh, we have to use AI, we have to use AI, but it can be used for many things. So what is the right thing? What is the right problem we should be solving with AI? And what is the right solution based on AI that users and customers will like to use? And when you have this period of uncertainty, but you bring design sprint into the table to deal with it, first of all, are bringing cultural impact because your teams are moving from debating constantly and making a lot of assumptions to testing those assumptions and with real data from real users make decisions. You are also moving at speed with confidence. You reduce months of endless meetings and conversations into a 4 days process that will lead to validated action. And finally, you are using more effectively the focus and time and effort and skills of your people because teams will be able to build what users really value, will be able to improve the delivery efficiency, and they will be more motivated and be able to generate outcomes that really matter. And if you want to go ahead and bring design sprint into your organization, you can start small and then scale. You don't need to transform all your organization from day one. You can start with one sprint pilot and test it with one initiative and see how it feels, how it fits into your organization, learning by doing. Then you could build an internal capability. You could train some of your people to run design sprints. You could hire experts on running design sprints. You could partner with facilitators and establish a way to use design sprint in your organization. And then you start scaling strategically, applying design sprint to different teams, different initiatives in the way that it makes sense. And it starts to be part of your culture of doing product discovery before you start building solutions. So, is a design sprint right for you? Let's go through this list of questions. Are you about to invest significant resources in a solution that you have not validated with users yet? Do your stakeholders have competing views on how to approach the situation, how to solve that problem, or even the problem you're trying to solve? Will be getting this wrong problematic? Will it drive to damage in your market position, customer relationships, team morale? Could you assemble a small team to focus in 4 days to solve this challenge and design and validate a solution with real users? Is there genuine interest in the leadership team to commit to acting based on what you learn from a design sprint? If you answer yes to these questions, design sprint is probably the right next step for you to move forward in that challenge. And if you need support to begin, let me help you innovate how you innovate. I can help you with facilitating design sprint for your organization or training people in your organization. Contact. Let's help your organization be better at deciding which solutions it's worth investing effort into.